Three, two, one. Okay, recording. Okay, so hi guys, how are you?
I am doing well now.
I'm good too.
All right. So how about we start with some quick intros? So Will, you can go first.
Yes, so I'm Will William. I'm the founder of Virus Racism, which is a youth-led campaign aiming to raise awareness of the discrimination against the Asian American community due to COVID-19. I live in Queens, New York, which is a borough of New York City, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I'm from South Carolina, so a small rural town right next to the city. I've been doing a lot of initiatives, so Girl Up, Save the Children, representation projects, but a lot of my lens of activism is racial justice and feminism.
Yeah. And so hi everyone, my name is Riya Goel. I am one of the co-founders of asianslead, and we are doing this panel today, which I'm super excited about. And I also was a teen advisor with Vanessa, and I'm a girl advocate for the working group on girls. So yeah, let's get right into it. So what do you think is the significance of Black Lives Matter? And is there any way that the movement has affected you personally?
I guess I could start.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter was always prominent when I was a little girl. So around like 9 or 10, it's always been a sentiment of my community and like advocating to represent Black lives and to save Black lives in our current system. But as the years gone by, it's kind of been like more prominent and like everywhere, and everybody's getting to know it. But I think Black Lives Matter to me is just showing light of what Black Americans go through today, and it's not like ignoring it. Like, we have to focus on the Black Americans because at a disproportionate rate we're dying, we're not getting health care, we're not getting education, we're going to be more incarcerated. So I think it's just shedding light on what Black Americans are still going through like 400 years later. And it's been very significant because it's been an outlet that I could use to advocate for my people and also have like a designated and collective movement. Because sometimes if ever like a movement or a liberation movement, there's a lot of different voices, but Black Lives Matter is like one collective movement. So I like that.
Yeah, of course. Will, any thoughts?
Yes, definitely. Although I'm not Black, I am a person of color, and I'm just so proud of the Black Lives Matter movement. I see so much unity, I see so much strength, I see so much perseverance in the movement, and I'm so proud of everything that's going on. I'm so proud of everyone that's been involved in the movement. I'm so proud of all of the protests, and I'm so proud that we want change. And it's significant to me because as a person of color, I love seeing unity.
Of course, yeah. And I think personally, just being an ally is so powerful in the movement. And I think that's what we're all here to talk about today. So right into the next question, what does allyship look like to you? And how would you address some non-Black people of color who are unsupported because they are also suppressed or also minority?
I could start off this.
Yeah.
So I'm not Black, I'm an Asian American. And I would tell other people that we are together. We're all people of color. We all want the same thing. We all want racial equity. We all want justice. And because of that, we all should be fighting together. We all should be aligning with the same movements. And we should all be intersectional and fighting for the same cause, which is racial equity. I would tell everyone that's not supporting the Black Lives Matter movement right now to support the movement, to sign petitions, to get to rallies if they can, just to do anything to support each other's movements.
Yeah, for sure. Vanessa, anything?
Allyship is something that I've realized is more deeper than what comes off on the surface. So I think first what allyship looks like to me is like letting the people who are currently oppressed in a certain movement to let them speak first and be on the front lines and be a support system rather than take that narrative to support their agenda. So I think that's also critical of allyship, and also being able to learn, because a lot of the times with racism, sexism, all these different oppressive ideals in our society, it's like ingrained in us. And I feel like it's important for us to dislearn a lot of the white supremacist ideals or anti-Blackness within our own communities, and to be able to make mistakes but be held accountable. So if non-Black people who are also oppressed, which I think POC solidarity is something kind of like what Will was talking about, something so crucial, because we all have our combined oppressions in America, just being non-white. And it's kind of sad, but I think when we start with one specific race, it's important to unite, because if Black people are liberated, then that could kind of be the stepping stone to other ethnicities also in America.
Of course. And I think what you're saying about intersectionality is so important, because it's not only, it's all people of color that are kind of suffering and being oppressed. And, we're standing in solidarity with, one of our community members and one of our communities, and which is so, so powerful moving forward. The next question, for those who don't quite understand, what is structural racism and how do we work to end it?
Yeah, I could start this one as well. Structural racism was something that was very new to me. Even like I'm like 18 and I've been a Black American, but like how systematic racism is in America is literally insane. And it kind of just means like racism, not just, like friend to friend, but it's like in every system of our world. So it's like when Black mothers are dying at a high proportion rate from birth than white people, or it's when especially like higher education, when there's like a small percentage of Black students in colleges, and also like education, healthcare, and it just means that racism is embedded in our governmental system. So I think something that I've been trying to dissolve, like personally, because I feel like it's a collective unit and it's in our system, so it's kind of hard to find a pinpoint a way to dissolve it. But I think just personally for me, it's just being educated on those systems and trying to just personally not be a victim of it.
Yeah. Anything for you, Will?
I completely agree with everything you just said. I think that structural racism, it needs to be eliminated. It affects every part of our society, from education to healthcare to employment rates. It connects to everything and it affects everyone. And so we all should be fighting it, because regardless of our race, regardless of who we are, we all need to fight against it.
Yeah, for sure. And something to just add, without the civil rights movement, a lot of different minorities in this country wouldn't have the basic rights or, privileges that we do have today. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there and say, why not stand with people of color? Why not stand with the Black Lives Matter movement when that's something that's, kind of propelled our current society today? So definitely agreeing with all of you on that point. So how do you address people that say all lives matter?
I could start this off.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, all lives do matter, but it doesn't take into account everyone's injustices. It doesn't take into account everyone's obstacles. You saying all lives matter, say that we're on an equal playing field when we're not, because a lot of us have injustices. A lot of us have obstacles. A lot of us have these experiences that we're not equal. And so because of that, we need something that's equitable for all of us, because many of us come from backgrounds, many of us come from communities that have been historically disadvantaged. Many of us face stereotypes and stigma and discrimination because of who we are. And so to say all lives matter is saying that we're all on an equal playing field and we should disregard our differences, but we shouldn't, because we need to recognize that we need to recognize that we face different obstacles and that we need to encounter and defeat those obstacles first.
Yeah, for sure. Vanessa?
Yeah, and I live in the South, so that sentiment of all lives matter has been rampant in my community, my high school, even some mutuals that I cut off. But I think with the all lives matter, I feel like it's colorblind, and I feel like it's a way for you to be blissfully ignorant to what's going on. And I kind of explain it to my non-Black friends or anyone who's kind of confused on what it means. It's just like when Black Lives Matter, it's just showing light and trying to propel what Black people are going through. And we're getting proportionally killed and all those negative things. And I think the best way to kind of explain it is just to say, it's not saying all lives don't matter, but right now we need to focus on Black lives because we're being proportionally killed and by healthcare and the police. So I think that's kind of how I would explain it.
Of course, and I think I read this article I think on the Washington Post, and it gave like such a great example. If around 5 or 6 people were in an accident, and one of the people had head trauma, you would treat that one person first compared to the other 4 or 5 people that might have minor injuries, and that's kind of a great, I think, almost comparison to what's happening in terms of Black Lives Matter right now, because we should definitely be treating those with more injustices. And the community with that had trauma would be the black community, and we need to stand in solidarity and help that community first before we even think about anything else. So I think that's just a great example. But yeah, so how do you address people who are against violent protests and against things like looting and arson and things like that are happening during these protests? Yeah.
I could start it off.
Yeah, sure.
So, so I think, well, first, I don't support violence. I don't support the looting that's going on, especially towards people, especially towards small businesses and people who make a living off of their small businesses. I, however, do support the protests, and that we need to be fighting for what we believe in. We need to be fighting for our rights, and that the injustices that we're facing right now should justify the protests that we are doing right now. I would say that violence is something that it's harmful, yes, but the violence that's occurring right now, it's occurring because of officials. It's occurring because of the politicians and the authority figures that aren't doing anything about it right now. So when we say that we're violent, we are doing this because it's for all of us. We are doing this because we all want equity, we all want justice, and we won't stop fighting until we get the justice that we need.
Yeah, and with the violent protests, I think a lot of it is media controlling and trying to put a negative light on the protesters. Because a lot of the times when you look at a situation, especially with Twitter, it's really a good outlet to see the real story. But like a lot of times it started off as peaceful, and then of course the police retaliates, and then of course we're going to retaliate. And it's just a lot of just misinterpretation. And even with like the looting and the violence, I think I don't really condone violence, but I kind of see the perspective of like, I've been pushed down for so long. Like, what are you going to do when you finally listen to what I have to say? Like, even with George Floyd and his murder, you can kind of see how it really took them rioting and burning down buildings for them to actually get the people arrested. So it's kind of like, what works, because like me voting might work, but like, I wish our politicians, our system would take account to like what the people are actually saying. Because if you don't, of course we're going to go to the extremes, because at what cost? What point do we get what we want? And I think it's just very interesting, and a lot of layers, and it's a lot of conversations about what violent protests are and how they are affecting our society. So.
Yeah, of course. And I think something that a lot of people use as a justification for the violence is that certain companies or places that they're looting don't necessarily support the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think in a way that's a way of just showing the injustice that's, in our current system. So definitely agree with both of you on those. So how do you address the news cycle? I think all of us scrolling through our feeds have started to see less and less about Black Lives Matter, whereas immediately after George Floyd's murder, we were kind of bombarded by all of this. And something to kind of consider is that these issues, these injustices, this oppression has been going on for centuries. So why are we, letting a news cycle take over? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could start this one out. Yeah, it was really interesting, and to see like Black Lives Matter kind of, start as a genuine, authentic pinpoint for activists and, supporters to advocate for Black lives. But as you see, it's kind of becoming like a trend. And like with businesses using that, oh, we support Black lives, but you don't take any actions to put any diversity into your workplace, your workforce, and even like your diversity in your models and your designers. So I thought it was very compelling to kind of see an activism movement kind of be gentrified and become a trend, like with the Black squares. We had 26 million Black squares, but 10 million petition signers on George Floyd's petition. So I thought just something that it's really weird in like the 21st century to see it become a trend. But I think the best way for me personally is to surround my platform or follow people who are supporting the movement, who are actively trying to push the agenda of Black Lives Matter. And I don't know how we could make it more receptive and like keep that momentum going, because a lot of people are able to shut their phone off and forget about it, but like non-Black people and Black people of color are trying to, like, we live this life, so it's not a trend for us. So that's why you kind of see a lot of Black people kind of advocate 24/7, and you kind of see other people just like post a cute little Instagram reposts and go with their day. So I hope that we could keep the momentum, but I'm curious on how we could strengthen the movement like it was in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. Will?
I completely agree. I think that I completely agree, and I think that there are a lot of people that do see this as a trend, but it's not a trend. It's not cute to repost a photo saying that you support something. It shouldn't be a new meme, or it shouldn't be a new trend, or it shouldn't be a new hot thing that everyone is doing. This is a movement. We need to advocate for racial equity. We need to advocate for racial justice. And like what you said, Ria, this injustice, this racism has been going on for centuries. And so why it's taking so long to end these injustices? And now some people are using this as a chance to boost their Instagram following or boost their rating on Snapchat. But that's not okay, because what you are doing by calling this, by not, even though you're not directly calling it a trend, by only reposting one photo every month about what's going on right now, that's not okay. And that you should be using your platform, regardless of what platform it is, to be constantly advocating for what you believe in, to be constantly advocating for racial equity and justice. I know for me personally, it's hard to see whenever people only post one post once in a while. And that's very frustrating, because if you're going to post one thing and nothing else about this movement, then why post it at all? So that's what I'm frustrated about. And that's why we need to change.
Yeah, of course. So great segue into, how do you think teens and should use their platforms for social good? And how do you use your personal platforms for social good?
I could
Yeah.
start this off.
Oh, you could go, William.
You could go.
Well, I guess for me personally, I'm not really into Instagram, so I'm still trying to like navigate it. But I think for Twitter, I like to retweet a lot of good threads about what protesters can use, and like use hashtags to like tell other protesters to get out of a certain situation. Because I know there was like a thing in the Brooklyn Bridge when they were in like a standoff. So I kind of use that hashtag to tell some of my friends who are protesting to kind of get away from that area. But I think the most productive way is just to use, when you do repost, be authentic about it. So do the behind the scenes work that a lot of people don't see. And I think, especially when it was starting, and a lot of people were kind of like showing accountability to their friends who weren't silent on everything. And I think that's a good way to use your platform, and to just like personally like hold your friends accountable, and just keep the attention on it as much as you can. But I do know for other Black people, it's kind of I would call it like a burnout, because, you know, we've been dealing with this fight for years, you know, like ever since we were little girls and boys. And in a way, it could be for like activism, or it could do your platform to be showing Black joy, Black happiness, because always pain and suffering. So there's two ways you can kind of use your social platform for good. But I think the best way is to make sure you're doing the behind the scenes work always, because it comes off performative when you're just posting about it, and in real life, you don't really care.
Exactly. Yeah, Will?
I completely agree. I think that behind the scenes work is so important. What you're doing behind the scenes and what you're doing besides posting that one post on Instagram is so important. I think we need to be using our voices I think we need to be using our voices and stories whenever we post something on social media. I know for me personally, I do this a lot of the times, but not always. But I should be doing it all the time, where whenever I'm reposting something on social media, I shouldn't only be reposting that one post. I should be adding my own experiences or add my own thoughts to it, so that it's more personalized and so that I have a connection to it. And I think by doing that, other people will have a connection to it. I know that for my platform, Virus Racism, we're expanding our we're expanding the awareness of the Asian American discrimination due to COVID-19 by posting our testimonies onto social media. And these testimonies share our thoughts, feelings, and experiences on this racism, on this discrimination. And I think that storytelling is so powerful because when we use our voices and we use our stories to communicate the experiences that we've been through, positive or negative, people learn from that. I think people learn from social media so much. And I think that social media will be our new, if not, it is our form of education right now. And so when we use our stories to educate others, then that creates a whole other movement.
Of course, yeah. And I think it's also about promoting ways to take action. And I think that's a great way to use your social platforms. I know that not everyone is in the position to donate, but there was a video that was circulating Instagram. I think it was like a 4 around hour video that was all Black owned businesses and ads that supported their movements and their businesses. So I think, you know, doing whatever you can and promoting taking those actions to your friend group. I think what's so you know, unique about social platforms is that it's really targeted to your community and your people, and no one else has that, right? So you don't have the same community as I do, but you know, we still have some intersectionality. So if we're constantly, you know, keeping this in the news cycle and keeping it in social media, I think it's definitely a good way to continue raising awareness for the movement and continuing the movement. So yeah, I think if you guys could talk a little bit about how to be accountable in this kind of in this time, in this instability. How do we move forward and kind of even live our own lives knowing that we're making some change? Yeah, Will, do you want to start?
I could start.
Mm-hmm.
So think I think right now being accountable is one of the most important things we could do right now. I think that we need to recognize what we've done in the past, but I also think we need to recognize what we should do in the future. I think that if you're not a part of the movement now or not constantly advocating for racial equity or justice, you should be. And that could be as something simple as posting on social media every time you see a post and then adding your stories, adding your own experiences to it. I think that being accountable and recognizing the experiences that other people have gone through and that you need to put in your share for the movement is something so powerful, and that we need to be sharing our stories. We need to be making sure that not only are we accountable, but also our friends, but also our peers, also our own classmates. We need to be sharing the information with our own friends and classmates. We need to be sharing them the petitions, the stories, the testimonies, the experiences. And that's how we create a community on social media, and that's how we combat racial inequities and racism overall.
Yeah, Vanessa.
Accountability has been something dear to kind of my whole experiences with this whole movement starting in March. Because I've been trying to educate myself on our systems, because I feel like a lot of times our history classes doesn't talk about the Black oppression, doesn't talk about the Asian oppression, doesn't talk about any oppression of minorities. And I feel like a lot of times there's like things that we were taught and that we have to unlearn constantly about our history, because America loves to hide every bad thing they do. So holding myself accountable has been like reading a lot of books from like the perspectives of the people. So from Black authors, from Asian authors, from women authors, about their experiences, and not trying to learn my history from someone who did a lot of research and is not even like a Black woman. So I've been trying to hold myself accountable in that, and trying to hold myself accountable about like new perspectives, because especially with the Instagram infographics, I've learned so much about something that I didn't even know was a thing, was respectability politics. And I've been trying to just learn that as well, and like trying to see how I can also be an advocate in my personal life, because it's easy to say I know everything on Instagram, but I don't. So I've been trying to read a lot of books by like Angela Davis, Assata Shakur, to kind of see how I could be a better Black woman and how I could be a proponent of change. And holding your friends accountable is also something I've been trying to do, because I don't really like confrontation, but I feel like it's needed, because in their little racist ways can lead to like someone's death. And I think all those stepping stones that led to George Floyd's murder was those little racist remarks that turned into your favorite cops. It was those little racist classmates that turned into your doctors. And I think it's important to hold themselves accountable. And so I've been liking to see like when someone has like a racist past, and how a lot of people are trying to tell their schools and colleges about them, because that type of energy can grow into like politicians and governors, and we'll still be in the same spot 20 years from now. So.
Yeah, I think your point is extremely valid. And specifically, the American education system is severely Eurocentric, and we never hear the voices. We never, and those voices that, aren't heard are never amplified. And I think that's something that we can create with social media, this amplification of voices who have been oppressed for centuries. And I think that's definitely a way that we're going to be moving in the future. So the last question, just to wrap up, how do you address the oversaturation type movement? A lot of people are like, oh, the news cycle should take over because there's just so much going on. It's so overwhelming. There's an oversaturation of information. How do you kind of address that and, tell people that this is not an issue that just pops up once on your feed and is just lasting a couple of days? Kind of, in concluding with the, the news cycle question, but how do you address specifically the oversaturation? I'll give you a minute to think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good question, because I haven't felt that sentiment from other people of like oversaturation. And I really don't think it's oversaturated, because I feel like a lot of the times, at least on my Instagram feed, it's kind of dying down. But of course on Twitter, it's like still rampant. But I think it's just a lot of people, they don't want to be bothered by it. But for other minorities, we're bothered by it every single day of our lives, like growing up. And I think it's very interesting for them to have that perspective. And then that perspective shows how not only ignorant, but how privileged they are to see it as oversaturation. Because that oversaturation has been, my life. So I think the best way to address it is to call them out on their ignorance and white privilege, most likely, and their privilege itself. And to kind of clock them for that, even having that thought, you know what I mean? And that really shows how our whole world is kind of wants to be blind to what's going on, because they want to be, on their individual, bikini pics or individual yoga pictures. But I think the information is needed, because I feel like we're so close to like a revolution happening, you know what I mean? And I feel like the new normal is gone, and then we're getting a whole new normal. And so I'm excited to see the future after this pandemic is slowing down, and to see where we stand, racially in America.
Of course. Yeah. Will, what about you?
Again, I completely agree. I think that oversaturation, I think that to people that say, oh, let's move on from this to this topic, to people that say, oh, this isn't trending anymore, or this isn't hot anymore, let's post about this instead. That's so not okay. I think that issues like racism, issues like injustices, they are constantly occurring, regardless of what the media tells us, regardless of what other people tell us. We need to be constantly fighting for it. And I know from my own experiences, some people, when something is quote unquote trendy about a current movement, they say that, oh, let me post this also. But when something isn't quote unquote trendy and you post something about it, these people might say, some individuals might say, oh, why are you posting that? That's so annoying. But it's not annoying to be posting about a movement that affects all of us. It's not annoying to be posting about racism and injustices and inequities that affect all of us. So I think that oversaturation, I think that we need to make sure that we are constantly advocating for the movements that we need right now, and that we need to be constantly advocating for the end of racism, injustices, just all problems that our world faces right now, and those that we don't have this, we young people need to be fighting against.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes oversaturation is kind of needed to kind of, prove this point, prove these injustices, and really almost shove it in people's faces that this is actually an issue that is affecting a lot of people. And I think, even just being in this quarantine, I think personally even has just taught me how much I don't know and how much I can do for my community and my just like little world and my little bubble. But I think that education, should be reaching a lot of people. And everyone should be inspired to take action, because if we don't take action, when will we? But yeah, I think that is everything. Thank you both for being on this call today. Both of your opinions and your perspectives were so inspiring, and we definitely need to move forward in this movement, being allies in the fight for racial equality, in the fight for racial equity. So yeah, I just thank you both. If you guys have anything to just say really quickly, go ahead.
I guess the only thing I would say really quickly is that we're all learning, and I think don't be wary about what you don't know, but actively try to learn what you don't know. You know what I mean? And don't always ask for people to teach you, and you should teach yourself. And we're all going through, we're all in a pandemic, we're all dealing with all this emotional trauma, and we're all just like consumed by everything that's going on. But I feel like if we just persevere for a couple more months and keep on fighting for this movement, keep on donating, keep on signing petitions, we can really see the change that we want to see. And we already have seen like little steps, like, San Francisco has defunded their police force, and, George Floyd murderers were arrested, and just so many good little victories to kind of keep your hopes up. Because I know for me personally, it's just been such a like overwhelming and like emotionally draining experience to go on my phone and see more people dying, more people being racist, more people not valuing Black lives. And I think just looking for those little victories and continue to do those little things of donating, signing petitions could really make a change.
Yeah, of course. Will?
I would say the exact same thing. I would say get involved with a campaign if you're not involved already. All of us right now have our own organizations and have our own campaigns, and you all can get involved in it. And I think that being involved in a campaign or a movement or an organization is so powerful, because if you look back at it in a year, 2 years, 10 years, you could say to yourself, I was involved in making that difference. I was involved in making that change. And as a young person, we all are young people right now. I think that what we're doing right now, and if we somehow could take the place of current politicians and officials, I think that what we're doing right now is so monumental.
For sure. Yeah. So I think that concludes it. Definitely get involved. To anyone listening out there, this is just such a great time to get yourself involved. And you meet, obviously you make change, but you meet some amazing people, and you can see that here. So yeah, thank you all for being here today, and stay tuned for our next little episode of this next week. And yeah, thank you all again. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.